The woman behind me in the TSA line was breathing down my neck like a rabid dog, her voice getting shriller by the second. Excuse me, you cannot bring that through security. That's liquid, more than 3 ounces. You're holding up the entire line. I turned around slowly, clutching my small cooler bag containing the precious cargo I'd spent the last 3 days pumping and storing. 24 ounces of liquid gold breast milk for my 6-month-old daughter waiting at home with my husband. "Ma'am," I said as calmly as I could manage, "this is breast milk. It's allowed through security." Her face turned the color of a ripe tomato. "I don't care what it is. Rules are rules. You think you're special because you have a baby?" That's when the TSA agent looked up from his station, and I saw something in his eyes that made me realize this Karen had no idea what she just walked into. Because what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Agent Rodriguez had been watching this entire exchange. And he'd been a father himself for over 20 years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you how a simple business trip turned into the most satisfying airport justice I've ever witnessed. 3 days earlier, I was standing in my kitchen at 5 a.m., pumping milk and trying not to cry. My name is Margaret Maggie to most folks, and at 52, I never thought I'd be dealing with breast milk drama again. But life has a funny way of surprising you. See, my daughter Sarah had given birth to little Emma just 6 months ago, and she was struggling. Really struggling. The kind of struggling that keeps you awake at 3 a.m. wondering if you're failing as a mother. Her milk supply had dropped dramatically after she went back to work, and Emma wasn't taking to formula well. As a former labor and delivery nurse myself, retired for 5 years now, I knew exactly what was happening. Stress, sleep deprivation, and the pressure of being a new working mom were wreaking havoc on Sarah's hormones and milk production. That's when I made a decision that raised more than a few eyebrows in our family. At 52, I decided to relactate to help feed my granddaughter. Now, before you think I've lost my mind, let me explain. It's not as crazy as it sounds. Grandmothers have been wet nurses throughout history, and with modern breast pumps and some hormone therapy under my doctor's guidance, it was entirely possible. Difficult? Absolutely. Worth it to help my daughter and granddaughter? Without question. The trip to Seattle was supposed to be routine. A quick 3-day pharmaceutical conference, something I still did occasionally as a consultant. But it also meant 3 days away from Emma, 3 days of pumping and storing milk to bring back home to Ohio. I'd been pumping religiously every 3 hours, storing the milk in hotel fridges, and keeping it all carefully documented and temperature controlled in my small cooler bag. TSA regulations clearly allowed breast milk through security more than the typical 311 liquid rule. I'd done my research, printed out the guidelines, and even called ahead to confirm. The SeaTac airport was bustling that Tuesday morning. My flight back to Cleveland was at 11:30 a.m., and I'd arrived with plenty of time. My knees were already aching from the conference. 3 days of standing in heels at my age was no joke, but I was excited to get home to my family. That's when I first noticed her. She was standing about 4 people behind me in the security line, a woman who looked to be in her early 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer outfit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. She was on her phone, talking loudly enough for half the terminal to hear. "I don't care what the delay is, Marcus. I need to be in Cleveland by 2 p.m. This is a $1 million deal we're talking about." She kept checking her watch, sighing dramatically, and making everyone around her aware of her obvious importance. You know the type, the kind of person who acts like their time is more valuable than everyone else's. I tried to ignore her, focusing instead on my small cooler bag and the paperwork I'd brought just in case TSA had questions. The milk was packed perfectly with ice packs, all properly labeled with dates and times. I'd even brought a copy of Emma's birth certificate, though I didn't think I'd need it. The line was moving slowly, as airport lines do. The woman behind me, let's call her Karen, because that's exactly what she was getting more agitated by the minute. "This is ridiculous," she announced to no one in particular. "I have priority boarding. I shouldn't have to wait in line with everyone else." That's when I should have known this wasn't going to end well. As we shuffled forward in line, Karen's patience was wearing thinner than tissue paper. Every few minutes, she'd make another loud phone call, each one more dramatic than the last. "Yes, I'm still stuck in this endless security line. No, I don't know why they can't have separate lines for business class passengers." I was trying to mind my own business, really. At my age, you learn to pick your battles, and airport drama wasn't on my list of things to engage with. But Karen was making it impossible to ignore her. That's when she noticed my cooler bag. "Excuse me," she said, tapping me on the shoulder a little too forcefully. "What's in that cooler? You know you can't bring outside food through security, right?" I turned around and gave her a polite smile. "It's breast milk. And yes, it's allowed through security." Her perfectly penciled eyebrows shot up to her hairline. "Breast milk? Seriously? How old are you?" That's disgusting." I felt my face flush, but I kept my voice steady. "It's for my granddaughter, and it's perfectly legal to transport." "I don't care if it's legal," she said, her voice rising. "It's gross, and you're going to hold up the entire line when they have to inspect it. Some of us have important places to be." The people around us were starting to stare. An elderly gentleman in front of me gave me a sympathetic look, while a young mother with a toddler behind Karen was shaking her head in disgust at Karen's behavior. "Ma'am," I said, drawing on 30 years of dealing with difficult patients and their families, "the TSA has specific procedures for breast milk. It won't hold anyone up." But Karen was just getting started. "Listen, Grandma," she said, and I felt something cold settle in my chest at her tone. "I don't know what kind of attention-seeking behavior this is, but you need to throw that away and stop making everyone else deal with your weird fetish." "Fetish?" She called feeding my granddaughter a fetish. The young mother behind her gasped audibly. "Are you kidding me right now?" she said to Karen. "She's trying to feed a baby." Karen whirled around. "Stay out of this. This doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does concern me," the young mother said, shifting her toddler to her other hip. "I've had to pump and transport milk before. It's hard enough without people like you making it worse." That's when Karen made her first big mistake. She pulled out her phone and started recording. "I'm documenting this," she announced loudly. "TSA needs to see how their rules are being abused by attention-seeking grandmothers who think they're special." She turned the camera toward me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, burning rage. But I'm 52 years old, and I've learned a thing or two about composure. So instead of losing my temper, I did something that probably surprised everyone, including myself. I smiled. "By all means," I said calmly, "please document this. I'd love for TSA to see exactly how their regulations are being followed." That seemed to confuse her for a moment, but she kept recording, muttering about entitled millennials, which was particularly funny since I was clearly old enough to be her mother. We shuffled forward a few more feet, getting closer to the actual security checkpoint. That's when Karen noticed the TSA agent at the front of the line. Agent Rodriguez, according to his name tag, was watching our exchange. "Officer," she called out, waving her phone in the air. "This woman is trying to bring large amounts of liquid through security. She claims it's breast milk, but look at her. She's obviously lying." Agent Rodriguez looked up from the bin he was checking and made eye contact with me. I saw something flicker across his face. Recognition, maybe? Understanding? "Ma'am," he called back to Karen, "please stay in line and wait your turn." But Karen wasn't about to be dismissed. She pushed past two people in line, dragging her designer luggage behind her. "No, you need to deal with this now. She's holding up the line with her fake breast milk." That's when Agent Rodriguez stood up to his full height, which was considerable, and I saw the expression that made me realize Karen had seriously underestimated who she was dealing with. "Ma'am," he said in a voice that could stop traffic, "I need you to return to your place in line immediately." Karen's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "I have global entry. I have clear. I shouldn't even be in this line." "Then why are you in this line?" Rodriguez asked, his voice deadly calm. And that, my friends, is when things got interesting. Karen sputtered for a moment, clearly not expecting to be called out on her contradiction. My clear wasn't working. The machine was broken." Agent Rodriguez nodded slowly, like he'd heard this excuse 1,000 times before. "I see. And your global entry?" "The line was too long." He gestured toward the back of our line. "Please return to your position and wait your turn like everyone else." But Karen wasn't done. Oh no, she was just getting warmed up. "This is discrimination," she announced loud enough for half the terminal to hear. "You're taking her side because she's older. This is age discrimination." I couldn't help it. A little laugh escaped me. Here was this woman, probably 15 years younger than me, claiming age discrimination in my favor. The irony was too much. That laugh was apparently the last straw for Karen. She whirled around, her phone still recording, and got right in my face. "You think this is funny, old woman? You think holding up hardworking people with your attention-seeking behavior is amusing?" The young mother with the toddler had had enough. "Lady, you need to back off. She's not bothering anyone except you. I told you to stay out of this," Karen screamed, now attracting attention from security personnel throughout the area. Agent Rodriguez started walking toward us, and I noticed 2 other TSA agents flanking him. But Karen was too caught up in her rage to notice. "I'm going to report all of you," she continued, waving her phone around. "This woman for trying to smuggle liquids, you for harassment," she pointed at the young mother, "and him for discrimination." She jabbed her finger toward Rodriguez. That's when Rodriguez reached us, and I saw something in his eyes that made me suspect this story was about to take a very satisfying turn. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass and ID." "Why? I'm not the one breaking the rules here." "Because you've caused a disturbance and made accusations of discrimination against federal employees. Now I need to verify you're actually supposed to be traveling today." Karen's face went pale for just a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Fine. Here." She thrust her phone and a boarding pass at him. Rodriguez examined the boarding pass carefully, then looked at her ID. Then he looked at the boarding pass again. And then he did something that made me realize this day was about to get much, much better. He smiled. "Ma'am, this boarding pass is for tomorrow's flight." The entire line went silent. You could have heard a pin drop in that section of the terminal. "What? That's impossible. Let me see that." Karen snatched the boarding pass back and stared at it, her face cycling through confusion, realization, and then pure mortification. But, the app said. "The app shows today's date," Rodriguez said patiently, "but your flight is scheduled for Wednesday, not Tuesday." The young mother behind us started giggling. The elderly gentleman in front of me was trying not to smile. Other passengers in nearby lines were craning their necks to see what was happening. Karen stared at her boarding pass like it was written in ancient hieroglyphics. "But I have a meeting. I have to be in Cleveland today." "I understand your frustration," Rodriguez said, "but that doesn't give you the right to harass other passengers or make false claims about TSA procedures." That's when Karen looked around and seemed to realize, for the first time, that every single person within a 50-foot radius was staring at her. Her phone was still recording, capturing her own humiliation for posterity. I can change my flight," she said weakly. "That's between you and the airline," Rodriguez replied. "But first, we need to address your behavior toward this passenger." He gestured toward me. I was still clutching my cooler bag, watching this whole drama unfold like it was happening to someone else. But Rodriguez wasn't done. "Ma'am," he said to me, "I apologize for this disruption. Are you transporting breast milk for a nursing infant?" "Yes, sir. For my 6-month-old granddaughter." He nodded. "Do you have your documentation?" I handed him my folder with the TSA guidelines, Emma's birth certificate, and my pumping schedule. He glanced through it quickly and handed it back. "Everything appears to be in order. How much milk are you transporting?" "About 24 ounces. And it's properly chilled?" "Yes, sir. Ice packs, temperature log, the whole thing." Rodriguez turned to address the crowd that had gathered. "For everyone's information, TSA regulations allow breast milk in quantities greater than 3.1 ounces to be transported through security. It's not subject to the standard liquid restrictions because it's medically necessary nutrition for infants." He looked directly at Karen. "Making false claims about TSA procedures or harassing passengers who are following regulations is not acceptable behavior." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I didn't know." "Ignorance of the regulations doesn't excuse harassment," Rodriguez said firmly. But then, something happened that I never could have predicted. Something that turned this whole situation from satisfying to absolutely perfect. Rodriguez looked at me with something that might have been admiration. "Ma'am, I have to say, you handled that situation with remarkable grace. As a father myself, I have nothing but respect for what you're doing for your granddaughter." He paused, then continued. "I also want to apologize again for the harassment you experienced. To make up for it, I'd like to offer you expedited screening." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what? Expedited screening? You can come directly to my station. Skip the rest of the line. and I'll personally handle your screening to make sure your breast milk is processed quickly and safely." The line behind us erupted in a mixture of applause and laughter. The young mother with the toddler started clapping. The elderly gentleman gave me a thumbs up. Even some of the other TSA agents were grinning. But Karen? Karen looked like she was about to spontaneously combust. "That's not fair," she shrieked. "She gets to skip the line because of this whole circus?" Rodriguez turned to her with the patience of a saint. "Ma'am, she gets expedited screening because she was harassed while following proper procedures. You, on the other hand, need to go back to the ticket counter and sort out your travel situation. And next time, maybe check your dates before you start yelling at people." I gathered my belongings and followed Rodriguez to his station, feeling like I was floating on air. Behind me, I could hear Karen arguing with the other agents, insisting there had been some kind of mistake, that she definitely had a flight today, that this was all somehow my fault. Rodriguez handled my screening with the efficiency and respect of someone who'd been doing this job for years. He carefully inspected each container of breast milk, checked the temperature, and made sure everything was properly sealed. "My wife pumped for all 3 of our kids," he said quietly as he worked. "I know how hard this is, and I know how important every ounce is. That woman had no right to give you grief about it." "Thank you," I said, meaning it more than I could express. "This means everything to my daughter and granddaughter." He smiled as he packed everything back into my cooler. "Tell your daughter she's lucky to have you. Not many grandmothers would go to these lengths." As I collected my belongings and headed toward my gate, I could still hear Karen in the distance, now arguing with airline customer service representatives about changing her flight. Apparently, the next available flight to Cleveland wasn't until Thursday, and it was going to cost her a fortune. But the best part? The absolute best part came about an hour later. I was sitting at my gate, peacefully reading a book and occasionally checking on my precious cargo, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Excuse me, aren't you the woman from security?" I turned around to see the young mother with the toddler from the TSA line. She was smiling and looked much more relaxed now. "I just wanted to thank you," she said. "What you're doing for your granddaughter is amazing. And the way you handled that awful woman? Perfect." We chatted for a few minutes about babies and pumping and the challenges of being a working mother. Her little boy was adorable, about 2 years old, with curly hair and his mother's bright smile. That's when she pulled out her phone. "I hope you don't mind, but I recorded some of that whole thing. That woman was so out of line, and the way the TSA agent handled it was incredible. Would you be okay if I posted it? I think people need to see how breast milk transport really works, and how TSA agents are actually trained to handle it." I thought about it for a moment. "You know what? Yes. Maybe it'll help other mothers who have to travel." She grinned. "And maybe it'll teach some Karens to mind their own business." The video, it turned out, went moderately viral. Not millions of views, but enough to get picked up by a few parenting blogs and travel websites. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, with hundreds of women sharing their own stories about traveling with breast milk and dealing with ignorant people who don't understand the regulations. But the real cherry on top came 3 days later, when I was back home in Ohio, finally reunited with Emma and watching her happily drink the milk I'd worked so hard to transport. Sarah was scrolling through Facebook when she started laughing. "Mom, you have to see this." She showed me her phone. Someone had recorded Karen at the customer service desk, still arguing about her flight change, still insisting that the whole thing was my fault somehow. The video was captioned, "When keeping it Karen goes wrong, woman misses flight, blames grandmother transporting breast milk." The comments on that video were less charitable than the ones on the original TSA video. But honestly, the best reward wasn't the viral videos or the supportive comments or even the satisfaction of watching Karen face consequences for her behavior. The best reward was Emma's contented sigh as she finished her bottle, looking up at me with those bright blue eyes that reminded me so much of Sarah at that age. Because that's what this was all about. Not standing up to Karens or going viral or getting expedited screening. It was about family. It was about doing whatever it takes to help the people you love, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable, even when strangers think you're too old or too weird or too whatever. At 52, I thought my days of late-night feedings and pumping schedules were behind me. I thought I'd paid my dues in the world of baby care and earned the right to be the fun grandmother who just gets to spoil and return. But life had other plans. And you know what? I wouldn't change a thing. Well, except maybe I'd change Karen's attitude. But some people, you just can't fix. 6 months later, Emma is thriving. She's crawling all over the place, laughing at everything, and yes, still enjoying the occasional bottle of grandmother's milk when Sarah needs the extra support. Just yesterday, I watched her pull herself up to standing for the first time, wobbling on those chubby little legs before plopping down on her diaper-padded bottom with the biggest grin I've ever seen. The pediatrician says she's hitting every milestone perfectly, her weight is ideal, and her development is right on track. Sarah beams when she hears these updates, and I can see the relief in her eyes knowing that our unconventional feeding arrangement has given Emma the best possible start in life. The whole experience taught me a few things that I think are worth sharing with anyone who's made it this far in the story. At my age, you accumulate a lot of life lessons, but some come at you sideways when you least expect them. This airport encounter wasn't just about standing up to a bully or dealing with travel stress, it became a masterclass in human nature, family bonds, and the unexpected ways that dignity and preparation can turn a nightmare into a victory. First, kindness matters more than we often realize in our daily interactions. Agent Rodriguez didn't have to go above and beyond for me, but he did because he recognized a grandmother trying to help her family. That small act of kindness, taking the time to listen, to understand the situation, and to treat me with respect, turned a stressful situation into something beautiful. I think about that moment often, especially when I'm tempted to rush past someone who might need a little extra patience or understanding. We never know what battles people are fighting, what sacrifices they're making for the people they love. Rodriguez saw past an older woman with a cooler bag and recognized a family member doing whatever it took to help. That recognition, that validation, meant more to me than he'll ever know. It reminded me that there are still good people in this world who choose compassion over convenience, who see the human story behind the inconvenience. Second, standing up for yourself doesn't mean stooping to someone else's level. This might be the most important lesson for anyone dealing with difficult people, whether it's at airports, grocery stores, or family gatherings. I could have yelled back at Karen, could have gotten nasty, could have made the whole situation worse by matching her energy and her cruelty. Lord knows, 30 years ago, I might have done exactly that. But age teaches you that dignity is a choice, and it's often the most powerful weapon you have. Instead, staying calm and letting her dig her own hole turned out to be much more effective than any argument I could have made. When you refuse to be dragged down to someone else's level, when you maintain your composure while they lose theirs, the truth becomes crystal clear to everyone watching. Karen's behavior spoke volumes about her character, just as my response spoke about mine. Sometimes the best way to win is to simply refuse to play the game. Third, family is worth every awkward pump session, every strange look, every Karen encounter in the world. This lesson hits different when you're in your 50s and thought you were done with the sleepless nights and feeding schedules. When I see Emma's face light up when I walk into the room, when I watch Sarah's stress levels decrease because she knows she has support, when I see my son-in-law's grateful smile as he watches his wife get a full night's sleep, it's all worth it. Every single uncomfortable moment, every questioning look from strangers, every time I had to explain to friends why I was pumping again at my age. Family isn't just about blood relations, it's about showing up when people need you, even when it's inconvenient, even when it challenges social norms, even when it pushes you out of your comfort zone. Sarah didn't ask me to do this, I volunteered because I could see she was drowning, and I had the ability to help. That's what family does. We see a need, and we fill it, no matter how unconventional the solution might seem. And finally, never underestimate the power of doing your homework. This lesson serves me well in every aspect of life, from medical appointments to travel to dealing with bureaucracy. Those TSA regulations I researched and printed out, that documentation I brought, that preparation is what made the difference between a nightmare scenario and a triumphant moment. Knowledge is power, especially when you're doing something that might seem unusual to others. I knew my rights, I understood the regulations, and I came prepared to defend my position with facts rather than emotions. Karen's ignorance became her downfall, while my preparation became my shield. This applies to so many situations in life, whether you're advocating for yourself in a healthcare setting, dealing with insurance companies, or simply trying to navigate systems that weren't designed with your specific needs in mind. Do your research, print your documentation, know your rights, and never assume that other people know what they're talking about just because they're loud and confident. Oh, and one more thing. Always check your boarding pass before you start harassing strangers in airport security lines. But I suppose that's a lesson Karen had to learn the hard way. The irony still makes me chuckle. Here she was, berating me for supposedly breaking rules and holding up the line, when she wasn't even supposed to be there in the first place. It's a perfect metaphor for how often our biggest critics are people who haven't gotten their own house in order. These days, I still get recognized occasionally by people who saw the video. Usually, it's other grandparents or parents who want to share their own travel horror stories or thank me for standing up for breast milk transport rights. Just last month, a young father at the grocery store approached me and said that seeing the video had given him the confidence to pump and transport milk for his adopted daughter when his wife was hospitalized. These conversations remind me that our actions ripple out in ways we never expect, that standing up for what's right in small moments can inspire others to do the same in their own lives. But the recognition I treasure most came just last week, when Sarah looked at me while I was feeding Emma and said, "Mom, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." The exhaustion that had been etched in her face for months was finally starting to fade, replaced by the confidence that comes from knowing you're not alone in the hardest job in the world. I looked down at my granddaughter's perfect little face and smiled. "Sweetheart, this is what family does. We show up for each other, no matter what. Even if it means dealing with airport Karens, TSA lines, and the occasional viral video along the way. And you know what? I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Every pump session, every travel day, every confrontation with ignorant strangers who think they know better. Because at the end of the day, when I'm holding Emma and she's looking up at me with those bright eyes full of trust and love, none of the difficult parts matter anymore. After all, some things in life are just worth fighting for. And Emma? She's definitely one of them. She's worth every sacrifice, every strange look, every moment of discomfort. She's worth standing up to bullies and researching regulations and maintaining dignity in the face of cruelty. She's worth it all, and she always will be. That's the thing about being a grandmother. You thought you knew what love was when you had your own children, but then these little ones come along and expand your heart in ways you never imagined possible. You find yourself capable of things you never thought you'd do, willing to fight battles you never expected to face, all for the simple joy of watching them grow and thrive. Emma is my reminder that it's never too late to surprise yourself, never too late to step up when family needs you, and never too late to stand up for what's right even in airport security lines.